So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to share a little bit about what I've been up to for the past year. So my research is on the gateway communities along the Continental Divide Trail, and specifically looking at the effectiveness of an approach called appreciative inquiry to allow communities to think about the future of the trail and their community. So I'll be starting off by giving an introduction and background, then diving into the research focus, as well as theoretical frameworks, then my methods, results, and conclusions. Okay, so the Continental Divide Trail is a 3,100-mile long national scenic trail that was designated by Congress in 1978. And so as you can see in this map, it goes through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, and it roughly follows the Continental Divide itself, which is the line of highest elevation through the Rocky Mountains. And so the Continental Divide is the headwaters of our nation, where on the east side, all the water flows to the Atlantic Ocean, and on the west side, all the water flows to the Pacific Ocean. So the protection of this 1 mile wide stretch serves as a critical migration corridor for wildlife and connects vast expanses of designated wilderness throughout the Rockies. It's also a connector of diverse landscapes ranging from the Chihuahuan Desert in New Mexico to Glacier National Park in Montana. And it's a connector of several diverse communities that have a nationally recognized recreation asset in their backyard. So gateway communities are typically small in population, ranging from less than 1,000 to 30,000, and they're largely rural communities with varying levels of dependence on an outdoor recreation economy and culture. And many towns are or were involved in mining, oil and gas, and commerce along major railroad lines. So the Continental Divide Trail Coalition is a national nonprofit working with federal land management agencies to protect, promote, and complete the trail. They were founded in 2012. The CTC has a broad reach. They're engaged in policy, trail stewardship, advocacy, community outreach, and much more. And so for my research, I decided to focus on the Gateway Community Program because I wanted to explore what community-based conservation looks like in the Rockies. And so the Gateway community supports designated gateway communities that are close to the trail to be a welcoming destination for all trail users. And so currently there are 21 designated gateway towns or counties, and there are more in counting. And the last designated community was Hidalgo County, New Mexico, which is a community that I chose for my research. So designation is an official process whereby passionate community members apply and get accepted, and they must have a volunteer committee created upon designation who will work to promote and protect the trail. The CDTC supports these volunteer committees by providing promotional materials, visiting the communities, and generally supporting them in any way that they can. So these local volunteers are typically from the chamber, small businesses, local government, and interested community members who want to promote the trail and raise awareness about the CDT. So my main research focus is centered on an approach called appreciative inquiry, or AI as I'll be calling it. So it was first established in the 1980s in a dissertation, and it's been used widely around the world to enact social change. It's based off of the theory of positive psychology, asking participants to think about their desired future, given the strengths that they see around them. It was first used in organizational management and has since been applied to a variety of contexts, including action research. So my question asks if appreciative inquiry, or AI, can effectively achieve its goals in the context of gateway communities. So my question is is appreciative inquiry an effective tool that allows gateway communities to identify community assets, create a shared vision for the future, and identify major steps to achieve their shared vision? So the research employs community-based participatory methods by providing appreciative inquiry workshops in 3 gateway communities. And so the 3 gateway communities that were chosen by CDT staff for the workshops are Steamboat Springs, Colorado, Rawlins, Wyoming, and Hidalgo County, New Mexico. And so these communities vary geographically. They're located in 3 different ecosystems. They also vary culturally in terms of how dependent they are on an outdoor recreation economy and culture. And they have unique histories and socio-ecological contexts. They also vary in terms of time since they were designated as a gateway community. And so for Steamboat Springs, they were designated in 2018, and this sits, just west of Fort Collins, population of about 13,000, and they have high elevation coniferous forests and high elevation mountains, and they're heavily dependent on an outdoor recreation economy. And next, Rawlins, they were designated in 2016. Their population of about 8,000. They're heavily tied to oil and gas industries and motorized outdoor recreation. And they're situated in very southern Wyoming in the Great Divide Basin in a high plains desert ecosystem. So Hidalgo County was designated only a few days before we tried to do the workshop. So they have a population of about 4,000. They're located close to the CDT's southern terminus, and it's only a few hundred miles from the Mexican border. And they're located in the high altitude Chihuahuan Desert. And so Hidalgo County has agricultural industries. They also have extraction industries, and they're in the midst of trying to build their outdoor recreation opportunities, especially for locals. Okay, so providing an opportunity for a community to envision the future of the trail in their town is important given the positive impacts that designation can have on social and economic community development. So this research is built off of previous research on the benefits of being a gateway community, including the social and economic benefits, the importance of visioning for gateway communities, as well as the appreciative inquiry framework. So upon designation, gateway communities can see economic impact from trail users visiting small businesses. In 2022, CDTC surveyed 136 small businesses across 36 gateway communities. And they found that 70% of small businesses witnessed trail users spending money or having a positive impact on their business since designation. The trail also has rippling economic effects throughout a region. So the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater conducted an economic impact survey of CDT trail users in Colorado, and they found that the estimated revenue was a whopping $9.6 million in state tax revenue and $5.1 million in federal tax revenue. So just as important are the social benefits of being a gateway community. In a 2021 article by Cervini et al., they found that having a well-maintained, nationally recognized recreational asset in their backyard, like a national scenic trail, can build community pride, social capital, provide opportunities for self-development, and allow a community to rally around a collective vision. That last point is especially good for my research. Gateway communities have a unique opportunity to develop outdoor recreation infrastructure that can boost the local economy. They can promote stewardship of the trail and increase pride of place and volunteerism. And there really are cascading social benefits, and I'm just naming a few. So the importance of a gateway community having a shared vision is outlined by Amy Camp's book, Deciding on Trails, 7 Principles of a Healthy Trail Town. And CAMP helped to launch the nationally recognized Trail Town program and is well known in the world of gateway communities. And so in her book, she outlines those 7 principles of a healthy trail town. And guess what? Number 1 is adopt a shared vision. So CAMP says that successful trail towns have a shared vision and a plan for getting there. And that when you have a vision in place, it shows in the work that you do. So the main theoretical background or framework that I use for my research is appreciative inquiry, or AI. So I was first inspired by appreciative inquiry, or AI, during my literature review, when I found that other studies had employed appreciative inquiry in gateway communities as a research tool. And it has 5 main stages that ask participants to think about positive moments in their community, imagine the future creatively, and think about what is needed to get there. And so the 5 main stages are here. They're define, discover, dream, design, and destiny. So appreciative inquiry, or AI, has been used as a research tool in gateway communities across the world, from North Dakota to Nepal, as an interview guide to better understand community perceptions of a protected area. And I also wanted to employ appreciative inquiry as a research method, but one that directly benefits participants. So I envisioned a workshop that would convene those working on the CDT to come together and think about the future of the trail in their community. So I use 5 different methods to answer my research question. The first is background research. So I spent 11 months before the workshops building my own knowledge of the Gateway Community Program as a whole, as well as individual Gateway communities. I attended local volunteer committee meetings, the Gateway Community Summit, and a National Public Lands Day celebration in Grand Lake, Colorado. And also in May of last year, I sent out a preliminary survey to gateway communities to understand better the goals that they have, as well as the challenges that they face in terms of community engagement. And so there were a diversity of goals and challenges that were expressed, and this really emphasized the need to choose 3 distinct communities for my research. And then also during my background research time, I came up with my research focus. I proposed the AI, or Appreciative Inquiry Framework, to the CDTC. And throughout the winter, I then delved into designing and planning the workshops. So the workshops were held in March and April of this year. And so Steamboat Springs and Rollins each saw about 10 participants. They represented nonprofits, government agencies, local business owners, and community members. And so the workshop followed the Appreciative Inquiry Framework, first asking participants to identify community assets as it relates to the trail, both physical and non-physical assets. Then imagine the future and create a collective vision. And lastly, think about what is needed in order to achieve that vision. What are some of those major milestones needed? And so unfortunately in Hidalgo County, New Mexico, there were only 2 participants who were able to join. So we didn't end up doing the workshop as planned, but we still discussed the stages of AI. So I audio recorded each workshop, transcribed the discussions, qualitatively analyzed those discussions, and created individualized community visioning reports, as you can see here. And so these reports will be given to each community to help them in their work moving forward. So my third method comes from the materials that were generated during each workshop. So at each stage of AI, participants wrote their ideas on sticky notes, they posted it to a communal flip chart, and then they worked together to clump and split those sticky notes into major categories. So by the end, there were 3 flip charts, each labeled assets, vision, and milestones. So after the workshop, participants were asked to take an anonymous survey reflecting on how they thought the workshop went. So all the questions asked were formatted as a rate the extent to which you disagree or agree with a statement. And so it asked their overall satisfaction with the workshop, how well it achieved its primary goals, as well as how well it achieved its secondary goals. And so it was a voluntary survey, and participants took the survey through Qualtrics on their phones or physically on paper. So my final piece of data were facilitator reflections. And so CDTC staff accompanied me during these workshops, and they worked alongside participants to create categories from the sticky notes and participated in conversation. So following each workshop, I informally interviewed them to reflect on what went well, what could be improved upon, as well as did the workshop achieve its goals. And so each reflection lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. So now to get into some of the results, we'll start with the survey. So overall, there were 15 participants who took the survey, about 3/4 of overall participants. Now remember that this only reflects those that attended the Steamboat Springs and Rollins workshop. As Hidalgo County, that workshop did not go as planned, and so I didn't ask them to take the survey. So in general, most respondents represented a nonprofit organization or a government agency. As you can see, the 5 and 3, totaling about half. And most had lived in the community for 10 years or more. And the majority had been involved in CDT efforts for 2 years or less. So overall satisfaction was expressed by rating the extent to which you agree or disagree with the following statements. The workshop was well worth my time, as well as I would recommend that another gateway community or town located near the trail participate in the workshop. And so as you can see in figure 1, both questions are showing very similar results. And overall, they said the workshop was well worth their time and they would highly recommend it. So it also asked them to explain why or why not they would recommend it. And so there are mostly positive things that they said, such as the workshop was well structured and generated a lot of useful ideas, as well as it's good to get interested people together in a room to brainstorm and elevate the trail in our community. So when looking at whether or not the workshop achieved its primary goals, there was definitely varying levels of agreeability depending on the question. So as a reminder, those primary goals are related to the appreciative inquiry stages. So for the first stage, discover, they were asked the extent to which the workshop helped them to identify community assets as it relates to the trail. And so you can see that 67% said strongly agree. And then for the second stage, dream, which asked if it helped them to imagine the future of the trail, 47% said moderately agree. And then another part of the stage was clarifying a collective vision, which is in blue. And this was rated higher than imagining the future, with 64% saying strongly agree. And then lastly, pertaining to the final stages of AI, design and destiny, only 43% of respondents said they strongly agree it helped them to identify major steps to achieve their vision, and 36% said moderately agree. So overall, the workshop most strongly helped participants to clarify community assets and identify collective vision, but it did not help participants as much to imagine the future or identify major steps to achieve their vision. So the survey also asked them the extent to which they thought the workshop achieved its secondary objectives. And so these secondary goals are those that are not explicit in the AI stages, but they're still overall goals of the workshop. So they would be nice if achieved goals. such as think creatively about the future, collaborate closely with others, find purpose in their work, and feel confident in their community's ability to achieve their vision. So the workshop most strongly helped participants to think creatively about the future. As you can see, that 67% said strongly agree. And it also helped them to collaborate closely with others, with that 53% saying strongly agree. So the workshop did not help them as much to find purpose in their work on the CDT. As you can see in the blue, the 40% said slightly agree. And it didn't help them as much to feel confident in their community's ability to achieve its collective vision, with 40% saying moderately agree. So moving on to facilitator reflections. So this produced a lot of interesting insights into how the workshop went from the perspective of CDTC staff. And I'll only share a few of the highlights here. So in terms of Steamboat Springs, the workshop gave people who work together in the same organization time to talk specifically about the trail, which they may not do otherwise. And it also allowed participants to discuss working collaboratively on the CDT as well as outside efforts. And it allowed CDTC staff to more effectively and efficiently connect with those working on the CDT in the community. And it also opened up new opportunities for partnerships with local organizations and companies. And one facilitator found that the in-person time was energizing, saying that it just really brings home about the work that we're doing. In terms of some of the challenges, facilitators found that participants didn't know what to expect or hadn't reviewed the agenda beforehand, which potentially led to some apprehension in the beginning. And there were some challenges to collaboration, such as not everyone being able to access the flip charts, or people only sitting next to those that they already know. And so lastly, they reflected that future workshops should intentionally shuffle people to facilitate more of that collaboration. And it could centralize the image activity in which participants were given the choice to draw their preferred image or their preferred feature. So the Rollins workshop had some great feedback. Facilitators reflected that the workshop effectively brought together a diversity of people from a variety of entities, allowing them to convene in person. It allowed them to discuss not only the trail, but community issues at large. And it was great to see how the group thought critically about what it means to be a gateway community that's authentic to Rollins. One of the biggest challenges expressed by facilitators was that it was difficult for the group to come up with milestones towards achieving their vision. So one facilitator reflected that the group is in an information gathering stage, and such as, they're wondering what hikers need in town, and they might need some more input from the CDTC in order to better output the vision and milestones. And so in terms of some of the opportunities for the future, they also noted more intentional collaboration amongst participants was needed, which is similar to Steamboat Springs, and we could have mixed up the groups more. And ongoing success in Rollins looks like spending more time in person, getting to know the community. So although the workshop didn't happen as planned in Hidalgo County, I still interviewed CDTC staff to better understand why that didn't go as planned. So in terms of positives, the conversation definitely helped the group to pinpoint next steps and keep that momentum post-designation. So I asked the facilitators why there was such low attendance, and they discussed that it's the nature of a very small community that has limited awareness of the trail. There was also limited availability for the people who could join, and one facilitator asked, do they even want to convene? So when I was down there, it was definitely evident that some bridges needed to be built in order for people to come and sit down together and talk about vision. The workshop, which ended up being a meeting, did provide CET staff with good insight into how they can support Hidalgo County in the future, such as grant writing, finding funding opportunities, and connecting them to other communities. So another measure of effectiveness was the number of sticky notes or ideas generated. So this measured if the workshop achieved its primary goals. So in Steamboat Springs, they generated many ideas, 20 to 24 ideas for each assets, vision, and milestones. And this was consistent with the survey questions that rated high in terms of helping participants to identify assets and create a shared vision. And it was inconsistent with the survey that found it did not help participants as much to identify milestones. As you can see, they created an entire timeline from easiest to hardest. And most importantly, the number of ideas for milestones was proportional to the number of ideas for assets and vision. So Rollins definitely saw more variation in terms of the number of ideas that were produced. They generated 29 for assets, 16 for vision, and 9 for milestones. And this was consistent with a survey that found it helped participants to identify assets the most, followed by vision, and lastly, milestones. This is also consistent with the facilitator reflections, who said that Rollins produced less milestones. So I just wanted to give a little insight into what our conversations during the workshop sounded like. So this is in Steamboat Springs, talking about trail culture as an asset. So we're very outdoorsy, and I think kind of a hiker sympathetic community. Most of the folks in this town, if they haven't done the CDT, they've done something else. That's big. So like you said, they're willing to pick up a hitchhiker. They've been that hitchhiker. They also talked about vision, and one vision was at Rabbit Ears Pass, people can get a map, which is also online and connected to Far Out, which is the app that thru hikers use, of all the support resources in town. Friends of Wilderness has created a map featuring the trail with environmental information created by Yambatika, as well as information created by the chamber. The trail is well marked and well maintained. So for Rollins, they expressed how showing empathy for thru hikers is important. We know how hard it is to live here. And so can you put yourself in place of somebody who's hiking 300 miles through this part of Wyoming? I mean, you should have a little empathy for them, right? And it was cool to see how this led to their vision of developing pride and hospitality of the trail within their community. So they also expressed how small acts of kindness were important, saying that years ago, a hiker stopped and asked if there was anyone in town who could sew. And so I just called my mom because their gaiter was ripped out and she just sewed it for him. So in Hidalgo County, we talked about how outdoor recreation should be a sustainable year-round idea. Somehow bridging that gap and making more of a year-round sustainable idea around recreation, where it's not just Continental Divide Trail stuff a couple months of the year. You're linking all the recreation that happens within our county, and then I believe they're going to change a little bit of the culture. We also talked about youth involvement, saying even for the youth to get on the trail to see that, oh, it's not just an opportunity to get outside, but there's other ways to get into stewardship and taking care of the land. And also this could be job opportunities, managing the trails or field programming, community stewardship. And I think there's lots of ways the trail plays a part in the community asset. So this just gives you a little window into what our conversation sounded like. So the study definitely has its limitations, most notably a small sample size. So the data definitely produced some interesting conclusions, but it's definitely not representative of the effectiveness of appreciative inquiry across all 21 gateway communities. And in addition, there's other ways of assessing effectiveness that would have strengthened the data, such as facilitator observations or interviews with participants after the workshop. Okay. So there are 6 main conclusions from my research, and this includes recommendations to the CDTC. So the first is directly answering my research question: is appreciative inquiry an effective tool that allows gateway communities to identify assets, create a shared vision, and identify milestones to reach that vision? And so based on my survey results, I would say yes, AI, or appreciative inquiry, can allow a community to identify assets, create a vision, and generate milestones. However, I did find that there are varying levels of effectiveness. So based on the number of ideas generated, the survey results, and facilitator reflections, the workshop was most effective in Steamboat Springs. Steamboat had a proportional number of ideas generated across assets, vision, and milestones. And Steamboat was also inconsistent with the survey that found the workshop did not help participants as much to identify milestones. The survey was more consistent with Rollins, who didn't produce as many milestones. It's also important to note here the difference between effectiveness and success, because both workshops were definitely successful, and especially in the eyes of facilitators. The Rollins workshop saw high attendance and a strong diversity of entities represented. They produced a high number of ideas for assets, vision, and milestones, and we really had a lot of great conversation and discussion throughout the process of appreciative inquiry. And so one theory for why Steamboat Springs have more milestones is because they have more resources available that supports outdoor recreation. They have nonprofits, stewardship groups, corporate sponsors, a free city bus. And so it might have been easier for them to imagine how to leverage those assets in order to achieve their vision. So another key takeaway is recommendations for future workshops. So it's important to provide more opportunity for collaboration amongst participants, like mixing up the groups and creating space for informal gathering. And future workshops could definitely use the image activity more, such as allowing everyone to produce a collective vision of a collective image of their vision at the end. So thirdly, this study suggests that appreciative inquiry should not be a one-size-fits-all solution to instigating social change. So based on the survey results, it largely achieved its primary goals, but it did not as much achieve its secondary goals, such as allowing participants to find purpose in their work or feel confident about their community's ability to achieve its collective vision. So AI can be considered a context-specific opportunity that has varying levels of effectiveness. The workshop did not largely shift feelings of confidence or purpose in participants, and I think this is important when thinking about whether or not AI actually enacts social change. And the true impact of the workshops is still unknown, and more research is definitely needed to understand whether or not achieving AI's main objectives actually leads to social change in the long run. So the workshops also highlighted the importance of CDTC's physical presence in gateway communities in order to meet their goals in community outreach. And this was expressed by facilitator reflections. So in Steamboat, I talked about how in-person interaction allowed the CDTC staff to more efficiently and effectively outreach to the community. And in Rollins, they expressed that continued success looks like spending more time in person, informally gathering. And in my own personal reflection, spending 3 days in Hidalgo County definitely gave me some insight into why the workshop did not go as planned. And then visioning is a key step for gateway communities and can be integrated more into CDTC's everyday work. So based on the proportional number of ideas across assets, vision, and milestones, AI was most effective in reaching its primary goals in a community that has a lot of community resources. However, this does not mean that visioning should only be for well-resourced communities, and I think far from it. One of the main lessons that I learned was that the trail is an equalizer, and it allows the CDTC to outreach to rural communities that don't already have a lot of resources and support and might be overlooked by other conservation or outdoor recreation organizations. So visioning is important for all gateway communities, no matter their unique context. But I did find, especially in Hidalgo County, that in order to hold a workshop, a community must be ready to sit down at the same table together and think about vision. Visioning can and should look different across communities, whether it be posed as a question for new communities to ponder, or a 3-hour-long workshop for communities that are ready to sit down and create milestones. And lastly, appreciative inquiry amplifies community voices and will allow CDTC to practice community-based conservation into the future. Appreciative inquiry asks community members to steer their own future, which I believe is well aligned with CDTC's community-based approaches. And it can be difficult to know where to start when thinking about visioning, and I think beginning with assets could be a great strategy for CDT staff in the future. And so with more research, it would be interesting to understand if the AI process itself was more impactful in the long run in Rawlins or in Steamboat. So overall, the study provided some good insight into the usefulness of appreciative inquiry across communities. And more research is definitely needed in order to understand the usefulness of it across a larger scale, across all 21 communities. In general, appreciative inquiry is a useful tool that can be implemented in many forms, tailored to meet the community where it's at. I recommend that the CDTC consider the ways that appreciative inquiry can enhance communities' ability to take advantage of all of those potential economic and social benefits of having a nationally recognized recreational asset in their backyard. Okay, yay, we've done it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, especially to my friends and family here. And thank you to my committee, and especially to Brett and Dawson, and to the cohort. Thank you so much. And especially to the CDTC for supporting me throughout this research. Thank you for my resources.